He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
I can't tell you how many times I sit down with leaders and communicators, business owners, entrepreneurs, and we talk about leadership communication. And you know, whether you're training employees, onboarding new employees, trying to close the deal with a new client, or just talking about your business in general, it's hard sometimes to select what you're going to say. You want to have the Oreo, right? Say a nice thing, tell the truth, say a nice thing, kind of package it together. You want to be able to convey your ideas without seeming too overwhelming, too stoic, or too fluffy and mushy. You want to be warm and competent at the same time. That's what they call charisma, if you listen to the psychologists. But you don't want to do that in such a way that you become vulnerable. And as a leader, as a sales rep, as a CEO, you got to be real cautious about that vulnerable thing, right? Well, no. And I'm going to tell you today 4 different basic aspects. Now, there's a whole lot more, but if you'll master these 4 different basic aspects of how to use a story, you can have some of the most powerful conversations in the world by using short, to-the-point stories and not have to worry about revealing something you're not supposed to reveal or exposing something you're not supposed to expose or sounding too academic, too narcissistic, or too heady. I'm going to teach you those 4 facets today. So stay tuned and grab a pen. You're going to want to take some notes.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I've been in many a meeting where I've listened to someone drone on academically, and honestly, I fall asleep. I mean, I'm trying to listen. I want to pay attention. I want to hear what they have to say, but there's nothing dynamic about the way they speak. And sometimes it's like listening to the Visine guy commercial, and while he's saying stuff that's really important, his monotone nature makes you crazy. You don't want to listen very long. You want to jump up and down in the corner just to keep yourself awake. You need 5 cups of coffee and a Red Bull just to be able to speed him up a little bit in your head. And at the same time, you may have these people who, well, they drone on, but it's not in a boring way. They just don't have anything important to say. They have to talk, but they don't have anything to say. And somewhere in the middle, you find that person who, well, they don't talk a lot, but when they talk, you better take notes of everything they say, because they might be done in 12 seconds and they've said the most important thing you needed to hear all day, and you were clearing your throat or shuffling your papers or turning your phone over yet again to make sure that you didn't have any new messages. And in that 12 seconds, you lost everything they had to say. You missed it. And they were so under pressure, because they're an introvert, to say it that you probably can't get them to repeat it. And if they did, it wouldn't be exactly the same anyway, because it just kind of bursts out of them like a bubble popping. And if you've been in any of those scenarios, on any one of the 3 sides, as the audience member listening to Mr. Drone on Boring, or the audience person listening to Mr. or Mrs. Drama who just has to say something even though they got nothing to say, or the audience member who's listening to that one person who doesn't say much, but when they say it, it's like gold nuggets dropped on the ground, then you understand the value of communication. And I don't care if you're running the company, if you're negotiating a big deal, if you're trying to negotiate with a toddler, or you're just trying to manage the people on your team. What I'm about to teach you about story will solve more problems than you could possibly imagine. There are 4 really basic categories or applications of story, and that's what I want to teach you today, is how to use those 4 different categories. And I'm going to demonstrate through some stories that I've selected many, many years ago. Many of them I've used over and over. If you've listened to this podcast for a great deal of time, you've heard these stories because I apply them in different principles on a regular basis. So I'm going to tell you what the 4 faces are, but as I move from one face to the other, I'm also going to demonstrate briefly what that face might look like. So here's the very first face of a story. It could be a lesson with a hidden message. A lesson with a hidden message. So here's my story. In it, you'll hear the lesson. The message is kind of hidden, but then I'll point it out at the end just in case you've missed it. About a year ago, we moved into a new house. When we moved in, it had these big, gorgeous showers. We just love them. It's like the shower is its own room. Everything is tile, floor to ceiling. The whole bathroom is tiled. It's gorgeous. But the problem was the builder didn't put any place to put a shower curtain or a dividing wall. There is no door. Literally, you walk out of the bathroom and into the shower, and aside from a little 2-inch ridge over the edge of the shower, you wouldn't know you're in the shower. It's like the whole room is the shower. And I had this odd fear for the first several months that we lived there that I would turn on the shower and take a shower and step out of the shower with that little 2-inch door onto that tile and whoosh, slip and bust my head on the toilet. And I would be found by the paramedics naked in the bathroom floor. Not a scene I want anybody to have to endure. And so I thought to myself, I need to be able to keep the water in the shower somehow. And I found this beautiful piece of tempered glass that was originally part of a shower door, and I cleaned it up and I put a nice chrome ring around the outside of it, and it looks really good. And then I looked at the tile and I thought, now how in the world am I going to make that stick there and stay there? So I went to Home Depot. Unfortunately, I ran into an old guy that day because, a lot of young people are like, I think glue's over there and I think nails are over there, but I'm not sure. The old guy was like, so what's the project you're working on? I said, I'm trying to put a glass wall on concrete covered in tile. He said, what kind of tile is it? I said, it's like this ceramic sandstone kind of a tile. I mean, it's got a little bit of grit to it, but it's still pretty thick tile. He said, oh, then you need a masonry bit. And I said, a what? He said, you need a masonry bit. I said, okay, what am I going to do with that? So you're going to drill holes into the tile. You're going to put anchors in the concrete on the other side of the tile. But if you don't use a masonry bit, anything else is going to get hot and shatter your tile, and you're going to have to retile your bathroom. And if you can't find the matching tile, it's going to look really bad. I was like, right. Yay. Okay, so where do I get a masonry bit? And so he walks me through the store to a masonry bit. And for the first time in my life, I bought a $20 drill bit. Not a set of drill bits, not a new drill. One drill bit. Just one. I didn't want a drill bit when I went into the store. I didn't need a drill bit when I went into the store, except that I had this problem. The problem was I didn't want to be found by the paramedics laying naked in the floor. And so the solution to my problem was to keep the water in the shower so when I step out on the rug, my feet get dry and I don't have to worry about walking around on a wet floor. The only way to reach that solution was to drill a hole in the masonry into the tile so that I could actually put the wall in the shower wall. All right. When I say to you that your story is a drill bit, here's what I mean. Your story is the tool that someone needs to reach the solution that you've discovered to the problem they're living with. Aside from the fact that your story is the tool they need to reach the solution for the problem that they have, they don't care about your story. Being able to tell a story that draws them to the conclusion to go, oh, I see how that works. They begin to take ownership of it along the way. That's the purpose. So what's the title of the story I just shared with you? Your story is a drill bit. What is the point? Your story is a drill bit. Now, there may be other aspects of your life that you realize that this thing that you have to deliver is actually just a tool to get you down the road to this next thing, and it's by itself not the solution. My story is not the solution to your problem, but it will point you there. My story is not the end all be all. There might be 50,000 stories that could point you in the same direction. But it's my story. It's a story that I lived through, and I can use that story to add in a little humor, to add in a little seriousness, to add in a little bit of a lesson. And if you listened to the whole story and got to the end and you laughed about me laying on the floor by myself naked, or you laughed about the idea of buying a $20 drill bit, or you thought to yourself, I don't know anybody that collects drill bits either. In all of those aspects, there is another reinforcement of the information that I'm trying to convey to you. But in the end, the punchline is the same. In the end, the purpose of the story is the lesson buried in it. And that is, your story is nothing more than a tool or a vehicle to get people to the solution that they're looking for. Now, if you knew that, could you think of a story that you could use in a leadership meeting? Could you think of a story that you could use in a sales conference? Can you think of a story that you could use to demonstrate a major accomplishment or a major challenge? Well, of course you could. And all of those reasons to use a story are valid for the people that you need to build relationship with. I want you to think of the stories that you could tell that kind of have a hidden message in them, and you don't reveal that until you get to the very end. When you can think through your stories that way, then you'll find a whole lot more value in using a story to convey a point. Let me tell you another of the four faces or facets of a story. A story could be a metaphor of a specific teaching. It could also be a parable, a fable, an allegory. And all of those are similar but different in the way that they're constructed and delivered. But let me give you just a couple of examples of a metaphor that you might embed in a story, or you might even make the whole story the metaphor. We live in a lake area where it's probably, a quarter of a mile to the waterfront from our house. But the whole area is lake area. The whole town is built like a beach town around a small lake, which is part of the Brazos River. And so around our area, there's a lot of greenery. There's a lot of just plain old woods. I mean, like the Australian thicket, you couldn't walk 3 feet into it without losing your way because it's just thick woods and briars and all that stuff. And one of the things that comes with that kind of territory is these little green grasper looking things. And I don't even mean the ones that they're like stepping on a Chinese fighting star and they stick in your foot and you have to have a surgeon to remove them. I'm talking about the little, they look like Velcro. Little tiny look like Velcro. And we have a dog who's a doodle. And so her face kind of looks like mine with all the whiskers, and it's fluffy. And when she goes out and runs up and down the fence line chasing the cats that run through the neighborhood wild, she will come back in with those silly little grass burrs stuck in her face. Both sides of her face, the ends of her ears, sometimes in her eyebrows, or that little puff on the top of her head where she looks like a cotton ball. And you can't just brush those out. No, you have to grab the hair strand by strand and pull it apart to pull those stupid little grass burrs out. Did you know that the Creator made those grass burrs that way for a reason? Yeah, on purpose. Not just to be annoying, not just so you have to spend more time with your dog with them yelping and you pulling. No, that wasn't the purpose. The purpose is those little Velcro grass burrs are seeds. They're made to travel. Sometimes on a bunny's butt, sometimes in your doggy face, sometimes on a squirrel or bird's leg. And many times they will travel not from the backyard into the house and into the waste can, but they will travel miles with a bird or a squirrel. Miles from where they were. Why? So they can make more of the plant they came off of. Why we would want more of those plants, I don't know, but that's the point. See, here's the metaphor. A well-told story travels like that seed. It gets stuck in your whiskers, and you don't even realize it for months later. I recently had a client that I've been working with since December. And at a retreat, they said to me, I finally get the grass burrs analogy. There are things that you said to me back then that my mind couldn't comprehend. lessons that you taught me, and I took good notes on them, and I've been recording our conversations, and I'm going back to them and listening to them now and realizing 6 months later, they make so much more sense because it's information stacked on information, stacked on information, because I've matured, because I've grown, because I've learned other things as well. And when I put them all together, these little graspers are beginning to come back, and I'm like, oh, that's what that was for. That's what that meant. See, there will be times that you tell a story that has no landing right now. It's not meant to. It's meant to go down there. It's meant to come back 6 months from now, 6 years from now, 15 years from now, and somebody goes, bah, aha, and it's like the angels of heaven are rejoicing, and the information begins to flood into their head, and they're like, that's what he was talking about. That's what she meant when she told me that story. Now I get it. It's kind of a timing joke. It's not the right time, but in time, it'll make sense. Here's another metaphor that you could use. Oh, my family, we're not big order out kind of people. We do from time to time. When we were in the city and DoorDash would pop in real easy, we might order a pizza a week or something. But there's always the debate of the pizza. What do you want on it? And we would always end up with something that was halved. And it was half this and half that, and some of this and some of that. And I hear people tell stories all the time, and they tell stories like dads order pizza. Dads order pizza with one of two methodologies. Dads either say, I'm going to get the pizza that I want, and you can either eat it or be hungry. Or they say, I'm going to get a Supreme with everything on it, and you can pick off what you don't want. Now, my wife usually doesn't argue about if we get the Supreme pizza, but one of the local pizza joints where we used to live loved black olives more than they loved pizza, apparently, because we would get them. And when my wife was done dissecting her pizza, she'd have a piece of bread with a piece of cheese stuck on top and a couple of pounds of green peppers on one side of her plate and a couple of pounds of black olives on the other side of her plate. And in her world, there wasn't much left of the pizza. For me, that is the pizza. The little pepperoni, a little green pepper, a little black olives. But see, here's the power of a story. The power of a story is very much like that pizza. Many people want to deliver exactly what they want you to hear. They want you to hear their story. They want to tell you about their life because they don't remember the first story that I told, that their story is nothing but a drill bit. It's just a tool to get you to the solution of the pain that you're experiencing. No, they think, I'm going to make this gourmet pizza and you're going to consume everything that I give you because by golly, that's what I'm going to give you. And that's a fail as a leader, as a communicator, as a storyteller. You should be able to gourmet your pizza, select and craft your story for the people that are going to be in the audience. And when you realize that you've invited friends over and you've already ordered Domino's and it's on its way, and your friend says, I'll have to order something else because I'm allergic to gluten. Oh, I'm sorry, those 4 large pizzas we order are not gluten-free. How many times have you seen a leader, a communicator, a teacher, a speaker walk to the front of the room, grab the microphone, and begin to deliver the non-gluten-free, non-dairy-free pizza version of their story? It's got everything in it. And you can't consume or appreciate or learn from or absorb or apply anything they've had to say. It's like going to a buffet when everything on it is against your diet or everything on it you're allergic to. It just doesn't make any sense. And yet speakers who don't prepare themselves for an audience that may have nut allergies or gluten allergies or dairy allergies, well, they find themselves delivering what the rest of the audience can't consume. How's that for a metaphor? And you could extrapolate from that anywhere you want to. But in the same way that we use stories to point out the journey of the conflicts, of the problems, of the pains, even the solutions, we can use those as metaphors, as fables or parables or illustrations even. So let's go into the next level. A lesson with an illustration or an example in it is different than the first one, which is a lesson with a hidden message. So the lesson with the hidden message, you kind of got to get through the whole thing to begin to see the parallels, to find out where you're at. The message is so buried in the story arc that you get to the end and you're like, oh, now I get it. The metaphor may be that it's multiple layers. Another metaphor could be the Chilton's manual. If you've ever taken a car apart and not used a Chilton's manual, you may have parts left over when you put it back together, because the Chilton's manual actually directs you to the place to put that one screw and that one spring inside the caliper before you put the wheel back on. Because if you don't do that, when you get done, the wheel goes on and you wouldn't know that it's missing, because it actually belonged inside the piece, inside the piece, inside the piece. How many times do we craft a story where there's something missing? We forgot to mention that one phrase. We didn't use that one connecting word, that one trigger word. We failed to point out that one tiny portion of the illustration that really brings the whole thing together. Because trust me, if you leave that spring out of your brake drums, for an example, the next time you pull the wheel off, your brake shoes are going opposite directions. You'll be lucky if they stop without dragging on a regular basis, because that's what that spring does. Seems like an extra part. It's got a really major part to play. All right, so in the lesson with an illustration as an example, Ronnie Akins and I were teenagers when we decided it was time for us both to buy cars. We need to earn some money. So we saw a classified ad that said, "Come clear some land, I'll pay you X amount of money." We thought, that's great money for us. So we convinced my mom to drive us out to the land. We showed up to the land with nary a tool in our hands. The old man looked at us and said, "Well, I do have a brush hog over there if you want to borrow that." And we were like, "A what?" He said, "Okay, how about a chainsaw? I've got one chainsaw. If one of you wants to cut and the other one can drag." And we were like, I don't feel safe using a chainsaw. I've never used one before. And we were 14, 15 years old. And he said, "Okay, well, I've got an axe and a hatchet." And so we took an axe and we took a hatchet and we went to work on a cedar tree. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen what it means to clear land in Central Texas. And in Central Texas, there's a whole lot of land that looks a lot like the lakeland where we're at, where you step past the driveway and into the woods and you may not find the driveway again because it's so thick with briars and undergrowth, etc. And so to clear land in his mind was find all the big oak trees and get all the brush out from under it and all the green briars and the cedar trees and the little scruff, the shoeback trees that grow between them. Get all of that out of here until all that's left on this land looks like a pecan grove of all the big old trees. 2 hours later, we had taken down one tree, and it was about the size of a baseball bat. And it was too heavy for the two of us to drag back. And we were sweaty, and we were tired, and we had accomplished basically nothing. We made our way back to the house, and the old guy said, "Would you like a glass of tea while you're waiting? You want to call your mom?" And we're like, "Yeah, I think we want to call our mom." And something dawned on me when he asked, "Do you want to use the brush saw, the chainsaw, or the axe or the hatchet?" I think he knew when we got out of the car that we had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea what the job was. We were beyond clueless as to the amount of work necessary to get paid what we expected to get paid. It wasn't too hard for anybody who knew anything to know we didn't come with any tools at all. We didn't pull up in a dually with a trailer on the back and a couple of brush hogs and a riding lawnmower and a front end dozer or even a little bobcat. We had nothing. Or we didn't even have knives or saws or axes. We had nothing. We had no idea the magnitude of the problem we were diving into. Let me say that another way, because every leader has encountered this. You've hired someone who doesn't know what they don't know. Maybe you've been that leader who doesn't know what they don't know. It's the first level of learning. First is that unconscious incompetence. You don't even know you don't know. And then you get to the next level where we were at the moment that he handed us the axe and the hatchet, and we realized now we are aware we don't know what we're doing. We never, in that case, reached the unconscious competence area where we could literally just roll up with our truck and clear the land and be gone in a couple of hours and it was all done. No, we didn't get that far. We did stop at the conscious incompetence. We realized we don't know what we're doing and it ain't going to change in a day. And we packed up our toy. Well, we packed up his toys and we went home. Now that's an illustration as an example buried into the story, where the story is the lesson in the illustration, the example all in one, and the punchline is still there. We didn't know what we didn't know. Now, if I just go to a new employee, if I sit down with somebody in a hiring meeting, or I work with a vendor to potentially buy their services. And I begin to ask them the qualifying questions to discover their level of competence. And I simply look at them and go, sounds to me like you don't know what you're talking about. Sounds to me like you're incompetent. Well, I've just burned a bridge. I've destroyed the opportunity to work with them in the future. They have no trust in me. I may be academically correct, but relationally, that's destructive. If, on the other hand, I can bring in that story and tell about clearing land and then say, where in that level would you be? Would you be rolling up, pulling a brush hog? Would you show up with your front end loader or your bobcat on the back of the trailer? Or would you be like us as teenagers and nary a saw in sight? And the question then is proven by the story, the evidence that I recognize your incompetence, and I'm not calling you incompetent. I'm asking if you have some competence that I haven't yet seen. And the story becomes the hook to the relationship. It also becomes the teaching point because the example, the illustration is buried in the story, and it's not accusatory, it's pointing my own failures and faults. That's a leadership principle you need to master, as well as a story selection and crafting principle you need to master. Finally, some stories are just purely entertaining. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning when we decided we're going to Dallas. And we took off down the highway to Dallas. Me, Dwight, and Doyle. I'm in the middle. I'm about 16 years old. Dwight is in the passenger seat and Doyle's driving. And Doyle was a little vision impaired. In fact, vision impaired to the extent that when his head was turned this way, looking apparently out the window, he was actually looking at the road, but he was looking at the road with this eye because this one doesn't work. And so that's the way he had to turn his head to see. And yeah, it was a little confusing. But what it meant was he had no peripheral vision on this side at all. And so at one point, as we're cruising down the highway, we're headed to Dallas, mind you. Although I keep seeing signs that say San Antonio, X number of miles, San Antonio, X number of miles. From where we were, San Antonio was south of us and Dallas was north of us, and you can't go far enough to San Antonio to get to Dallas unless you go all the way around the earth, and we didn't have time for that. It was 3 o'clock, and I was supposed to be at school at 8. Yeah, we're not going to make it to Dallas by daybreak. In fact, going toward San Antonio, we're not going to make it to Dallas at all. I finally convinced them to turn around. And as we turn around, Dwight decides I'm going to play road sign baseball. He reaches down on the floorboard and grabs a beer bottle from where there should be no beer bottles because we have no open container laws in Texas, but there was an empty beer bottle. He climbs out the window, arm out the window, and says to Doyle, get closer. So Doyle pulls over, swing and a miss. Well, this happens 3 or 4 times. We've gone far enough now that we're off the edge of the asphalt. We're now in the place where half the tires are in the bar ditch and half of them are barely on the shoulder of the road. And we're catching the humps every time we go over the culvert of somebody's driveway. And Dwight's still swinging at road signs and missing. And so finally he gets up on the window far enough that his waistband is on the window. His belly is outside the vehicle. He's holding on to the mirror with his left hand and stretching with his right hand. And he says, I got this one. I got this one. I got this one. And Dwight gets a little closer, a little closer. Doyle pulls a little further off the road, a little further off the road. All 4 tires are now in the grass. We're completely jumping over these culverts. And I hear a swing and a giant thud. And I look over and I see the bottom of Dwight's boots because he got far enough out the window that the sign didn't hit. His shoulder caught the road sign and it yanked him completely out of the truck. He's now laying on the ground and I'm laughing so hard I'm about to wet myself. I can't tell Doyle, stop. Finally, about 150 yards down the road, I'm like, stop, 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 stop. And he's like, what? Did he get it? I'm like, no, we've got him. We had to turn around and go back and pick him up, and that resulted in a fist fight that was actually as comical with 2 drunk rednecks fighting on the side of the road as anything I've ever seen. Now, I can make the moral of that story really quick and say you got to be cautious who you hang out with because sometimes it's your circle of friends that gets you in more trouble than anything else. Ultimately, we all drove home that night. I did make it to school the next day, and it wasn't a big thing. That's the kind of story that fits in that entertaining, engaging category. Could you make a point with it? Eventually. Could you point out something with it? Eventually. But sometimes, like the pizza buffet, what you've got to say isn't for everybody. You've got to find a little something to throw on the side. Tomorrow morning, we're sponsoring a networking event. And our obligation as sponsors is to provide the breakfast for the crowd. Well, most people bring 3 or 4 dozen donuts, throw them on the table with some orange juice. There's breakfast. Somebody else is already providing coffee and water, so that's good to go. Others like cook a gourmet breakfast burrito with brisket and eggs and cheese, and it's yummy, and they take half of them home. I don't know what the balance is. I don't know exactly what to bring, but I think what we're going to do is a few croissants, a few donuts, a few little specialties like some apple fritters or something, and some fresh fruit. Because we want to be able to kind of meet everybody. That's the entertaining story. It's the gluten-free option on the pizza buffet. It's the opportunity to reach somebody where they are, knowing that you need to connect with them, and they're going to listen more when they have a little bit of understanding of who you are and what you've been through. Some of those entertaining stories for me talk about me walking around in the Congo in my bright pink shirt in a place where the local cab driver wouldn't go. Some of those stories are just about my kids, but then there's also a hidden message in them. And I have hundreds of stories that I've selected for those purposes, that I've crafted to great detail for the purpose of communication in an audience that may change on a dime. I might walk up there thinking I brought the supreme pizza. I've got everything you could possibly want, and then realize the entire audience is gluten-free. It could happen. As a leader, as a communicator, it's your job to know. It's also your job to know that when you get up there and you start to share your story and it's not landing, you're going to have to modify just a little bit to make it fit. You're going to have to find one more story that delivers the message the way you need to, that connects with the audience, because otherwise the message doesn't get delivered at all. If you'll take the time to do that, you'll be a much more masterful communicator and a greater leader. And if you need help doing that, go to storypowercoach.com and let's schedule some time to talk. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.